Welcome to Exploring Santa Cruz, a bi-weekly program on KSKD 90.7 FM. I'm your host, Mathilde Rand. My guest is Nancy Ellen Abrams. Nancy Ellen Abrams' modest goal is a beautiful, meaningful, accessible, and accurate version of the new human story emerging from the sciences, especially from cosmology and evolutionary biology. Because, she said, such a story could bypass religions and unify us humans enough to cooperate worldwide against climate change. She's a lawyer, philosopher of science, author of 3 books, and a lifelong songwriter, currently using music to help the story. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you.
Nancy, before we listen to some of your songs, tell us about being a philosopher of science. What attracted you to this field of study?
When I was a child, I knew absolutely nothing about science. And when I think back about my education in middle school, or junior high as we used to call it, there was one science teacher, and all I remember learning was the names of some plants, which I was totally not interested in. So I get to high school, and I took physics, and I remember I was always asking the teacher, why? Why does it work this way? And he handed me a book, which I still remember because it was really a turning point in my life. And it was a little tiny book called The Universe and Dr. Einstein. And I was totally blown away by that book. After that, when I went to college, I majored in the history and philosophy of science at the University of Chicago, and I have just been fascinated by the meaning of science, not just what it means, but what it means to us in our world. How does science fit in? So that's an ongoing concern of mine.
What I did was I went to the library's website and requested the book, The Universe and Dr. Einstein. It was very appealing. After I talked to you, I thought, I got to read that. And so the writer is Lincoln Barnett, right? Barnett, yeah, right. Good. You started doing that, and then did you start writing songs already about what you were learning, or did it come later?
I've always been writing songs since I was a child, and then after college, I was really sick of being a student, and I went to Europe for a couple of years, and I sang with a cabaret troupe in Italy. We sang in Italian, and I would translate our songs into English and French, and we had a real show going on. So that's when I really started songwriting, when I was with the troupe.
And that was in your 20s?
That was in my 20s, yeah.
These songs, have they always been philosophical?
They started out political. We were a very political troupe. We did political satire, and that's what I really started out. Later on, when I came back to the United States, I went to law school. I eventually ended up on the staff of the U.S. Congress in the Office of Technology Assessment, which used to be the Science Office of Congress. Congress actually had a science office that looked at the future and at the scientific angle on all of the legislation. But that office was abolished in 1995 by Newt Gingrich and the so-called Contract on America. The Republicans decided that we don't need scientific advice that's independent. We have lobbyists. Good enough.
What I understood from our conversation previously to prepare for this, that you say people are not thinking about the distant future. What do you mean by that?
When I was on the staff of Congress, I was in the office that was supposed to look at the distant future. And the way we defined the distant future was 30 years into the future, because most of the offices were focused on the next piece of legislation, the next election at maximum. So 30 years was considered incredibly luxurious, long-term. But those 30 years have passed. Mm-hmm. And because that was really such a short time in the sense of dealing with the whole world, none of those problems that we dealt with then have been solved. So we really need to think about the much longer-term future, because the impact of what we're doing today to our planet is going to last thousands of years, not 30 years, thousands of years. Mm-hmm. The oceans will rise for at least 1,000 years if we stop putting out carbon dioxide tomorrow. We are doing things now with a very short mental time span and putting out effects that are going way beyond what we're able to conceive. So what we really need is a way to think about the future that takes all this into account. And that's one of the things I'm working on.
So I remember working with the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. They had an Earth Democracy group, and I was part of that. And they were talking that, like Native Americans, we need to look ahead at least 7 generations. And so that's more than 30 years.
Yes, 7 generations is a really good start, but not nearly long enough. And the reason that we haven't really been able to think that far ahead is that we have not had knowledge about what could possibly happen. We haven't been able to think that far ahead because the science wasn't there. And this is the amazing opportunity of our time. I will step back a second and say my husband is Joel Premack, who's one of the creators of the modern picture of the universe, basically answering the question of, it started out with a big bang. There was a great soup of particles. How did the structure of the universe that we see today, the billions of galaxies in these beautiful spiral and elliptical structures, laid out along filaments, long lines, and where the filaments of galaxies overlap, there are great clusters of galaxies. Where did all that come from? How did a soup turn into that? It turns out that's our story. That's the beginning, at least, of our story. Mm-hmm. And when you start thinking about the universe on that scale, you realize that that's our story. We all came here because of what happened over 13 billion years ago.
It's kind of like a miracle, how it all came about.
It's interesting that you use the word miracle, because really what a miracle is something that we do not know how to explain. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean it's unexplainable in principle, but a miracle is something that we really just don't know how to explain now. The fact of the matter is we can't explain this. We can explain, not I personally, but the cosmologists like my husband, can explain what happened going back to about the Big Bang. Mm-hmm. There are also theories about what happened before the Big Bang that set up the initial conditions for the Big Bang. And the theory is called cosmic inflation. And then if you ask what came before that, there's another theory. The thing is that before that, because we can't get any evidence, it's metaphysics. But it is very good mathematics. What I want to say is that my husband and I, he has been working on this theory for over 40 years. And as a philosopher of science, I've really been paying attention. We've always had these discussions that I would say, well, what does that mean for the rest of us? I personally was taught that Earth is an average planet of an average star in a universe where no place is any different from any other. And that turns out to be wrong. We are on such an unusual planet. They've discovered 5,000 or so extrasolar planets, and not one of them is like the Earth. Not one. Now, 5,000 may not sound like a large number when you talk about the cosmos, but that's all the extrasolar planets we've discovered. So one of the things we need to appreciate is how incredibly rare Earth is. It is absolutely a jewel of the cosmos. And the other thing we have to appreciate is that it took 13 billion years to create us. And we could have another billion or so years on this planet with good conditions if we don't mess it up ourselves.
Mm-hmm. For us to change how we are living on this earth, we need to change our attitude. You mentioned to me that people are focusing on the bad because we're always focusing on danger. We're alert to danger, survival. But we're not focusing on what I call then that miracle, that incredible possibility that we have on Earth to use sciences, to look towards the universe, to learn more, and then make changes. We're not doing it. Why is it, I always ask, why is it that we're not doing it?
Well, some people say, we just evolved to live 30 or 40 years and reproduce and then die. Mm-hmm. And so we're not equipped to think long-term. I don't agree with that. I think the reason we don't think long-term is we don't have the concepts. And once the concepts get introduced to you, you can start to think much longer term. Mm-hmm. And what modern cosmology is doing for us is it's really giving us new concepts, new ways of thinking about time, and that can open our minds. And so Joel, my husband, and I have written 2 books together where we try to show how to think about the modern universe, how to wrap your mind around it, because it is very weird. But also, what we look at is, why should we care about this? How can we actually use these ideas to think in new ways about politics, about economics, about our whole life on Earth? Because if we have new metaphors, it can really open our minds. There's this wonderful quote from Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, who did this great TV show years ago with Bill Moyers, and he said, if you want to change the story, change the metaphor. And that's really what we need to do. We absolutely need to give ourselves new metaphors. And that's one of the things we try to do in our books. We try to actually present the universe visually through symbols. You can't do it through photos. I mean, there's no picture of the universe that represents the universe, only objects in it. But through symbols, we have represented the fundamental ideas that govern this new picture of the universe, which is based on dark matter and dark energy. So dark matter is this weird substance. Nobody actually knows what it's made of, but it's most of the galaxy. Galaxies are basically gigantic blobs of dark matter with a little bit of ordinary matter right in the middle. And dark energy is the energy that's causing the universe to expand faster and faster. And there's a dance between the two of them because dark energy is ripping space apart while dark matter is pulling matter together. And that has spun the galaxies into being.
Well, what I need to do right now is I need to take a break, and then I want to listen to some of the songs, because some of that, what we're talking about, you put in songs, which is really fascinating. People, we are listening to Exploring Santa Cruz on KSQD. My name is Mathilde Rand, and my guest is Nancy Abrams, philosopher of science and a lifelong songwriter. So we're going to listen in a moment to a song called Galileo's Logic. Tell us about that.
I was on the panel at the Wilma Theater a few years ago where they were putting on Brecht's play Galileo, and there was a panel discussion at the end, and the play basically tells the story of how Galileo discovered that Earth was not the center of the universe, and then the church basically threatened him with torture unless he took it back. So I was shocked to hear in the audience that many people felt that Galileo was a coward because when the church threatened him with torture, he said, okay, my theory was wrong. I take it back. They thought he should have allowed himself to be tortured like some kind of religious saint. And I thought, that's unbelievable. So this is what I wrote the song about.
Okay, let's listen.
It doesn't matter what the heretics say. Listen to the church. Earth is unmoving till the end of days. Listen to the church. Earth is the center of the heavenly spheres. In the great chain of being, God placed us here. It doesn't matter what the heretics say. Listen to the church. He heard of an invention and full of hope, Galileo ground lenses for a telescope. He trained it on Venus, and there he saw the proof that he had been waiting for. Venus had phases, so it circled the sun. Earth was not the center, the whole cosmos was undone. They led him to the dungeon. The Pope showed him the rack. It's this, he said, or take your theory back. Galileo looked in horror and began to shake. You're right, he said, I'm wrong. My theory was a mistake. Master, cried his student, how can you now give in? No one will believe us if you let them win. It doesn't matter what the church may say, Earth still moves. moves. It doesn't matter what we say or do. Earth isn't listening to them, me or you. It doesn't matter what the church may say. Earth still moves. He whispered to the student, yes, I did pretend remorse. Earth doesn't need my pain to keep it on course. It will sail on forever. Let the Pope cry heresy. But this is how God made the earth, so God agrees with me. It doesn't matter what the church may say. Earth still moves. They could torture me night and day. Earth still moves. Why be a martyr to look more pure? That can't make truth any truer. It doesn't matter what the church may say. Listen to the earth.
There's a lot in there.
Yes, I hope so.
So we need to move away at that time. We moved away from the earth being the center of the universe and the thinking about it at the time that people who didn't agree would have to be tortured. But he was smart.
Yes, Galileo was much smarter than people even realize today, because a lot of people think that that was the beginning of some kind of a conflict between science and religion. But Galileo understood that the conflict was not between science and religion. The conflict was between the church and God. Because, as he understood it, if this is the way God created the earth, who are you, church, to say that it's not true and to punish me for it? I'm on God's side. I mean, it was perfectly clear to him. And I think if people could understand, people who believe that, I personally don't believe that God created anything, but people who believe that God created the universe should realize that what science discovers about the universe is therefore, by definition, the way that God wanted it. And for them to deny science is just completely incoherent.
How often do you perform your songs in public?
You know, I perform whenever somebody invites me to perform. It's not really my profession. It's really my great pleasure. I actually wrote the Galileo song because I was invited a month or so ago to be the entertainment at the American Physical Society, which is the conference of physicists. And I wrote that because I figured that was a topic that physicists would relate to. But I've sung at many conferences. I like to write a song about the subject matter of the conference. I sang at the first Global Sustainable Agriculture Conference at UCSC and various other ones, different topics.
I remember you telling me about the Third World Agricultural one, where you had a song about the agriculture, the Third World
Yeah, this
Bind.
is the one on global sustainable agriculture. I didn't know anything about it, but I read a couple of books to understand, and I decided I have nothing to say to these scientists who are actually trying to figure out how to make agriculture a healthy part of the natural ecology rather than poisoning it with pesticides and fertilizer and so forth. I wrote a song, it's called Third World Bind, and it really is about the third world farmers who are in a bind because no matter what they do, they really can't succeed. And yet, these are supposed to be the customers of this new science that these people were producing. And there was a Peace Corps trainer in the audience that night, and he asked if he could use the lyrics of my song as part of the Peace Corps training. I was delighted.
Fascinating. So you don't necessarily perform for money, but you do it because people ask you and because you want to share the story the human story, the new human story.
People do pay me if I
Right.
have to travel
Of
and
course.
go to a conference and so forth. Yeah, they'll pay me. But depending on the audience, yeah, I'll go where I'm asked.
That's great. So the next song and the second song we're going to listen to is called The Gem of the Universe. What inspired you to write it?
This was a song I wrote for an Earth Day celebration, one of the very early ones. And I must say that at the time I wrote this, Pluto was a planet. So I know it's not considered a planet now, but in the song it's a planet.
Shall we listen?
Sure.
A friend of mine was ready to take her own life. There seemed nothing you could say. She'd fought for years to save the beauty of the earth. So it'd get uglier each day. And the powers that be were one vast conspiracy. So I said, let me take you on my spaceship for a tour around the planets. Keep your eyes open, I think you'll change your tune. Have you been on Mercury lately? There your feet will instantly bang the 800 degrees and there ain't no shade. You can't even sing the blues, there's no atmosphere to use, and you age real fast when you use only 88 days. Let's move on to Venus, you say, goddess of beauty in ancient days. But take a deep breath and you get thick CO2. The clouds are poison gas, all is dead. Nothing but rock hot enough to melt lead. And it feels when you walk like you're slogging through boiling glue. Ooh, so how can you think that the earth's beyond hope? That life is nothing but doom and gloom. Let me take you on my spaceship for a tour around the planets. Keep your eyes open and I think you'll change your tune. We once thought Mars would be just fine. Nice green people and an Earth-like climb. But there's no trace of life on that cratered world. A warm day there is 17 below. There's nothing to do and there's no place to go. Just watch the sunset while dust storms swirl. On Jupiter beneath ammonia gas, Galileo spied a giant hurricane through his glass. 400 years ago, it's raging still. Saturn, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, cold dead worlds, that's enough, we don't need to go. There's nothing there like good old chlorophyll. So how can you think that the Earth's beyond hope? That life for us couldn't get much worse. Warm days, children, birds and trees, oxygen blowing free on the breeze. Earth is a gem of the universe.
The Earth is the gem of the universe.
Absolutely.
Not-
The more we learn, the more true that is.
Right. But we're not the center of the universe.
Earth is not the center of the universe, but interestingly, very interestingly and shockingly, it turns out that intelligent beings are central, not geographically central, because there's no geographical center to the universe, but we are central to the principles that underlie the modern picture. Very surprising, very enlightening.
Maybe listeners are interested in where to get your books. Is it your website? Should people go to your website to
No,
learn more?
books, you just go to Amazon for my books. The first book is called The View from the Center of the Universe. discovering our extraordinary place in the cosmos. And that extraordinary place is central or special in multiple ways. Mm-hmm. That's the first book. The second book is called The New Universe and the Human Future, How a Shared Cosmology Could Transform the World. And that is about how to use some of these cosmological ideas to rethink economics and politics and basically our world. Mm-hmm. My third book, which I did not co-author with my husband, he has nothing to do with this one. The third one is called A God That Could Be Real. And what that is a rethinking of the concept of God so that it could be a useful idea, completely coherent and consistent with science, but useful in our world and not a divisive concept that seems absurd and relies on supernatural.
Now, if they want to reach you or learn more about you, they can go to Nancy Ellen Abrams, all one word, Nancy Ellen with an E, EllenAbrams.com. And unfortunately, we ran out of time. I wanted to hear some more thoughts from you, but we ran out of time. So I want to tell people that they were listening to Exploring Santa Cruz with Nancy Ellen Abrams. And you can reach her, you can learn more about her on NancyEllenAbrams.com. Does your music appear on your website?
Some of it, you can just ask Siri, play Nancy Abrams, and you'll get one of my albums at least.
Superb.
Can I say one more thing? If we're going to save the world, we have to have fun doing it. I don't sing because I'm happy. I'm happy because I sing. And you need to do what makes you happy, and then you can do the work.
That's right. And you want people to cooperate, collaborate, sing, and don't look just for the bad.
Do art.
Do art. Okay.